To make our basket, we are going to turn our newspaper into reeds that we can weave with. To do that, open your newspaper enough that it looks like a single sheet. Then fold it in half lengthwise. And fold it in half lengthwise again. And cut along the seams. You are going to need at least 16 strips, so cut a few pages until you have a big stack. Cut into strips. You put your dowel at an angle, cutting across one corner of the newspaper. And just start rolling. Keep your hands close to the end that you are adding the paper on. So the end of my dowel has disappeared into the beginning end, which is fine. And I'm just going to put tiny little piece of tape on the end to keep it from unrolling. And then it's just a matter of, if you hold it loosely enough, sometimes it'll slide through. If not, you have to grab and twist to try and work it free, and you can usually feel it. Now, if your paper rod, or paper reed rather, ends up a little bit too short, you can kind of twist it a little bit to make it longer, or twist it in a little bit to make it tighter and thinner. You can kind of feel how and where the paper is willing to work. And don't be alarmed that this end is a lot smaller than this end. That is a natural thing that you get from rolling the paper, and it'll actually come to your advantage if you need it, because you can take the small end of a second tube and insert it into the big end of this one to make a longer piece. Once you have all of your tubes, and you want to make sure that they're all approximately the same size, you can see this one came out a bit bigger. That's okay, I can work with it if I need it. But I should have everything I need here. All you want to do is push and glide your fingers so that you flatten all of your reeds. Now, you don't want to overwork the paper, because if it gets a little too pliable, it makes it a little bit harder to work with. Alright, so I'm going to take 5 and 5, put the others off to the side for the moment. Lay out my 5 pieces. And I'm going to start my base by weaving in 5 more pieces in the very middle. Now you can shimmy everything down from the side and just try and eyeball where one should go so that the rest can shimmy in. Or weave one in so it's in the exact middle, and then weave in one from the edge and one from the other edge. And do the same with the last two, and that will help ensure that they are centered. I'm just going to do that, because that's pretty much what the first weaving will be with the over-under technique. Now I'm going to go under where I was over and over where I was under. This is very much the same weaving that I'm sure a lot of you learned as children. And I'm just going to tug it right up to the edge so that everything is staying as closely woven as possible. So I'm going to put one more in from this side. And I do apologize, my hands are probably going to be in the way for a lot of this. Alright, so now I have 3. I'm going to take my other 2 and put them in on this side. If you want to, if it will help while you are weaving, you can take one of your clothespins, or even 2 of your clothespins, and just keep the corners that you're not working on flipped. Put that from there. Now, you don't have to do this part. I am just doing this so I can keep my hands away to show you a little bit easier. All right, so I have all of my 5 papers from each direction woven in the middle. Now I'm going to take 3 more pieces to start building up my sides. So I just turned my base a little bit so I could get to a side where the outermost piece goes over, because I am going to lift this up. I'm just going to bend it 90 degrees. And so I'm just going to put a little bit of tape, wrap it around. I'm going to take my next piece, and this I'm going to tape to the inside of the same piece, same vertical piece, except that I am taping it to the inside. And I am only taping it to the 2 pieces that I'm trying to attach, not to any of the others. And now for the last piece, I'm going to take and tape this to the top, to the outside again. So I have 3 pieces started. All right, and now I am going to weave these around using an in and out. When I get to corners, I am going to just keep following my in and my out. And I'm just going to weave them all simultaneously. So this bottom one goes out, then in, then out, in, out, and I am going to move my clothespin to hold it in place. Right, and then the second layer it went in, so now it's going to go out, in, out. Hold on. Oh, no, missed one. So, out, in, out, in, and clothespin in place. And my last piece was an out, so now it's going to go in, and then out, and then in, and then out. So you can see that I've started with 3 layers with the in, out, and I've taped it in the very beginning just to help me get started. With regular basket weaving with reeds, you would not tape it, but this is taped. So as we turn the corner, so now we are working with these 5 pieces. So it was out, so now it's going to go in, even though we're turning the corner, and then it's going to go out, in, and you can kind of put a little bit of a bend in the paper with your finger. And I'm going to maneuver my clothespin so that it is holding it in place. And while I'm working on this, I want to make sure that everything that I'm weaving stays nice and tightly woven. And you will notice that even though I am weaving pieces around, I am maneuvering the uprights just as much. So now the last piece on this side, for the middle piece that we're weaving around, was an in. So I'm going to bend up and do an out. And then I'm going to do an in, and an out, and an in, and an out. Make sure everything is nice and snug down. I can pull on my uprights a little bit. And again, this is, just go with what you feel. You don't want to pull so hard that something rips, but you don't want to make it loose so that it's going to sag and fall apart. Clothespin that on. All right, so now for my last piece, I've ended with an out. So now I'm going to go in with, of course, my little fold. I'm just kind of folding it against my finger. All right, so I'm going to go in, out, in, out, in, making sure that everything is nice and taut and nothing is kinked or loose. I'm going to move my middle clothespin up to there, because the middle one can kind of hold itself a little bit. Actually, the bottom one can too. Part of why I'm weaving 3 at once. And I'm going to put a clothespin here on my first corner. So now I've got 2 sides woven together, and I'm going to start on my third. I'm doing exactly the same thing. Just pay attention to your corners to make sure that everything is creasing instead of pulling. In. and then move my clothespin. There's actually enough clothespin room that I can clip both of them with one, just to try and keep some of the bulk away. And then the last one. I'm just taking the clothespin off long enough to shape my corner. And I'm going to go ahead and put it back on and move my other clothespin around so that it holds all my pieces. So now I've got 3 layers done. And again, I went outside on this piece, so when I rounded the corner, I went inside. I was inside, I went outside, and we're just weaving around and around and around. So now the last side. Now, once I get back to my beginning, I have 2 choices. I can either cut and tape my piece where I started, or I can try to weave it in a little bit. I'm just going to fold this into a little bit tighter of a point. And I'm just going to weave it back through the very end so my ends overlap. Now to do this, I am using my fingers to pull my pieces away so that I can fit another layer of newspaper through. Also my finger to pull the other layer of newspaper through. And I can undo that by pulling up, folding and pulling up a little bit on my uprights. Alright, so now I've got layer number 2 wrapped around. And again, I'm just gonna kind of fold a little bit to make a little bit of a better point. And for this one, weave it through the inside. Probably not seeing this on camera, but it's pretty much the same thing. I'm just weaving through and overlapping. And just be careful that the paper doesn't tear or become too loose. It is a distinct possibility. Yeah, you're not seeing any of this. Oh, crap. Okay, so my paper did tear a little bit. So I did get it most of the way weaved in, but I'm also going to throw a small piece of tape on it. There we go, just to make sure that it stays in place. Take my last end. Paper clip comes off, so it's out, in, out, in, out, in. Make sure my corners are nice and formed. Coming back to this corner, maybe even throw my other clip on there. Yeah. Now that I've got this woven in, I can throw a clip on from this side just to keep my corner in place. And I am going to weave these around, and because it is currently the top row, it is a little bit easier. And with peace of mind, a little bit of tape. Not taping it to my upright, but just taping it to itself to form a ring. Alright, so now that I have 3 layers around, there we go. I'm just going to do a little bit of maintenance. I am pushing down on my rings that I just made and pulling up on my uprights and just kind of cinching everything into place, making sure that everything's in the right place. And I'm just going to throw my clip back on there because I can feel it coming a little bit loose. Same thing right there. Because it is the top row, it hasn't got the other weavings to hold it down. Now, I've still got plenty of vertical left, so I'm going to take another piece, and now I can work one at a time, and I am back to the beginning where I started. I can tell because there's all sorts of tape everywhere, and I am going to tape to the inside, nice and snug, just like the others. And I'm going to weave this one around. On average, I found that all of my reeds were long enough to make it all the way around a 5x5 grid base with enough overlap. If your pieces are not long enough, or if you want a taller basket, or you want just a bigger basket and you started with a different number of base numbers, you can take the wide side of one and the narrow side of another and put them together to make a longer piece. You could even add a drop of glue on the inside before you put them together to make sure that they hold. Again, it is very important to pull up on your uprights while you are working. Because sometimes you will go around and just do a round like this of pulling on your uprights and notice that all of a sudden you've got a lot more to work with. Alright, now I could probably add one more layer onto this basket if I really wanted to, but I'm going to stop here and show you how to finish it. I'm just throwing clothespins on all of my corners. Alright, so the first thing you want to do is take all of your pieces that are on the inside, leaves, according to the top layer, and you want to bend them over the top and weave them down the side. So I am going to take this and very much the way that I wove my rings around, I'm just gonna make a little pocket and then use my fingers to get that down in there. If you have a small something like a chopstick or a knitting needle, you could use that to help you. You want to be a little bit careful while you're doing this that you don't loosen up other areas while you're trying to maneuver the paper into place. I'm just moving my clothespin over so I can work with this piece here. And I'm just going to weave it in, pull it tight, making sure not to bend anything, but still keep it nice and straight. Maneuvering clothespins is like half the battle on this thing. And I find that even though it would be easier to work with my thumb, with my hand kind of in this position, sometimes because your thumb is bigger than your finger, it is easier to try and work it that way because you need a smaller gap to fit your finger in than you do your thumb. You can see how this piece here, and you can see how loose it got down here. So I can pull up a little and then pull down and just straighten that out. So now all I would do is take a scissor and cut that loose. I'm going to do the same thing for this piece. I'm just going to pull up at the top and then pull down again, just to keep my bottom nice and tight. As you can see, when you pull on these things, it does shift the whole side. And I'm just going to cut off the excess. Alright, so now that I have all of my ones from the inside pulled around and woven through the outside, I'm going to do exactly the same with the rest of these, except I'm going to be weaving them into the basket. This may or may not show up on camera, but it is exactly the same trick. Alright, so I mentioned you could get something like a small knitting needle to help you put this stuff through. So I'm just using the needle to help figure out, help get my paper rewoven. I'm just kind of folding it over, folding the tip of the paper over the tip of the needle, and then pushing both of them through the piece. Now with these inside ones, you can weave it through both pieces. I may end up not doing that just because it would be that much more difficulty. Because it is right at the very bottom, and I would be hitting up against the bottom of the basket. All right, last piece. Bye-bye. Sometimes it really does help just to pull it back out, fold it around into a little point, and try again. It also doesn't help that I ripped this one a little. There we go. Alright, so now I have my square basket, all I have to do is go around and trim all of my ends. Maybe do a little bit more shaping, but it is good to go. For those of you who have it, you could Mod Podge this or spray adhesive just to overkill all the joints. That's pretty much it. Ready to carry stuff.